There are a few things here. So when you're using other discourses as well as institutions, either or both. So in principle, there's no harm in using, in principle, political or any other technologies from other civilization, in principle. But the main thing is, there are two main things about this use. What are those things which we are using? What is their nature? What is their nature? What is their nature? Because there might be some things which their nature is such that they are incompatible with Islamic civilization. And those things which are incompatible with Islamic civilization, even those can, it doesn't mean that we have to reject them in toto. So even those things which are incompatible with Islamic, even those things in principle can be divided into two categories. First, you can still use them, but before you use them, you would have to deconstruct them. And then you can use different parts of within Islamic civilization. And in principle, there can be things which you can't even, after that, you can't use them. Okay. So when we want to use something, the first question is to determine what is the nature of that thing. Because without understanding the nature of that thing, using that can be dangerous. Dangerous in the sense that it can be, against, you can compromise your core values. So you have to understand the nature, and then you can ask whether they are compatible with Islamic civilization and its values, or incompatible. And even if they are incompatible, we don't want to reject them out of it. And even those things, we can then see whether they are usable after deconstruction, and there might be something which are not usable even after deconstruction. And by use, we are using this use in non-instrumental sense, because when we use something, we can use it as something worthy in itself, and we can use it as an instrument as well. So the word use is not used here in any reductionist instrumentalist sense. Okay, so the first thing is, and then the question is how. Yeah, and then the question is how. So what are those things we are using? That's the first thing. And the second question is, how are we using them? The question of how is very wide-ranging, and what I would say here would be just a tip of the iceberg. And this question needs to be studied on its own, at the conceptual level as well as at the practical level. So how do we? So we can use things which are compatible with this. Even then, the question is, how will we use them? And one general broad principle which we can imagine is, when we use things, there can be two situations. What is the situation? That's very important, and the context. Whether Islamic civilization is dominant or is weak and overwhelmed. That's the main question. What's the context? So I think using principles and technologies and concepts in a situation when Islamic civilization is dominant, where the institutions are overwhelmingly Islamic, where the society is Islamic, where the political power belongs to Islam, would have totally different implications than using some values when Islam is weak, when the education system is not Islamic, where Islam is not socially dominant, where the institutions are not Islamic. Because in the latter case, things you are using, their meaning would be largely and necessarily determined by the dominant context. And in order to use principles and technologies in that circumstance, we would need to do double deconstruction at the level of ideas, and deconstruction at the level of application as well. So I think these are a few broad conceptual consideration when we talk about using something alien, whether it is political technology or physical technology, within Islamic civilization. Okay.